This is the advice that's ringing in the ears of fat acceptance every single time they spew their nonsense. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam. Lately I feel like I can't continue talking about fat acceptance without talking about the other radicalized group that creates fat acceptance talking points. The radicals in the fitness community are the reason that fat acceptance exists in the way that it does. These radicals in the fitness community help create fat acceptance talking points, and so I feel like I can't talk about one without talking about the other. Today we are going to be talking about Elliott Hulse, a charismatic, good-looking, fit, self-proclaimed alpha male who went right off the deep end. This is his devolution story. Or is it? Recently, Elliott popped up in my algorithm and I was shocked to see how far gone he was. His content was pretty extreme compared to the things that I remembered. I had originally found him about 9 or 10 years ago, and the Elliott I remembered was a smaller, still physically built Elliott standing in a gym that was not very fancy in a white t-shirt, sort of giving people advice. And the advice wasn't radical. So I couldn't understand how he had seemingly fallen so far, giving such radical weight loss advice that was also just dripping in misogyny. So I started to research and pull some things together to create this video on the devolution of Elliott Hulse. And I had a moment where I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. Did Elliott ever devolve? Had he always been this way? Where was the Elliott I remembered giving this simple advice? You see, I found his self-titled channel first, titled Elliott Hulse. I filtered back to his oldest videos, and it was right there, plain as day, that his earliest video had to do with being a male, being an alpha male, being a misogynist. How could I have missed that? Was there ever a point where he was this person that I remembered? I mean, a quick scroll through shows us that, it was pretty like college frat boy-esque, wannabe alpha male material that he was publishing. How could I have misremembered so badly? Where was the Elliott that I remembered? Did he exist? He did. He did exist on his second channel, Strength Camp. And Strength Camp is the channel, it has more followers than his self-titled channel. But this is the channel that I remembered. It was very focused on his fitness business. This came out when YouTube was just getting off the ground. A lot of the super old videos from 15 years ago are potato quality, him working out with his clients giving testimonials, and that sort of thing. When I found his channel, he was doing a segment called Yo Elliott, which was kind of like an old school newspaper advice column, but in video form. People could write in, of course, always starting with Yo Elliott, ask him a question, and he would stand in front of the camera and give them an answer. These were the videos that I remembered, and these were the videos that I liked the most. People would write in Yo Elliott and ask for his advice. His advice included things like, just do something.
2-3 times a week, weight train. Don't get so caught up in what reps and sets or, all the things that can confuse and make you, have paralysis by analysis. Just freaking do it.
Don't overcomplicate it. Go for a walk.
Just walk.
Doesn't matter when you eat, just be in a calorie deficit.
If you're getting the calories that you need to get to gain weight, just eat the fucking calories during the day. Like, spread it out if you want, pile it up at one end of the day if you want. It really doesn't matter.
So once I found these videos that I remembered, I wondered how he had gone from this.
Here I'm gonna go ahead and approach this as a myth buster. Almost like a bearer of common sense.
To this.
Crazy technique to lose 20 pounds in 90 days. Stop eating.
As I sifted through, it became clear to me that Elliott always sort of had this like preacher-esque leadership style, speaking style. It was very clear, even early in his channel, that he was preaching to the masses, right? Sort of shepherding his herd, if you will. And I am not a psychologist, but I've seen enough cult documentaries to know that this is the way to gain and maintain a following. In fact, to help solidify my point just a little bit here, in recent videos, as recent as 3 years ago, he has said things like this.
Here's the other thing too, everybody trying to live so fucking safe and do everything so by the book and try to preserve their life as long as they can. Sometimes it is through the extremeness, through the eccentricity that we actually live our life's calling. So you can't judge someone because of their extremeness, because that might be the very reason why they're a genius. So you gotta give them that, you know? Look at all like the wounded artists and stuff. After they die, while they're alive, he's crazy, he's nuts, he's psychopath, all kinds of shit they want to say, but when he's dead and all they have left is his art, he's a genius. So don't judge.
So in this sense, he hasn't really devolved. It's sort of always been there, and he was able to more easily hide that part by hosting it mostly on his second channel. You see, his channels didn't really cross over in content a lot. It did occasionally. And the reason I stopped following the Strength Camp series was when he went through, I don't know if it was a breakup or a divorce, he definitely started to drip more misogyny than normal. And so I guess moral of the story for this part of the chapter, we should all ask questions of who we're following online and not just believe everything we hear. We see people on both sides who are one click too far into the rabbit hole, right? And so it's easy to see, we typically talk about fat acceptance being one click too far, but it's easy to see that both sides can easily go one click too far. Another example of this with Elliott is that the man believes if you put UV light on your manhood, that it increases your testosterone. It's easy to see how radicalized he is, and it's just as easy to see that as it is to see how radicalized fat acceptance is. I heard once upon a time, and I feel like it applies here, Alex Jones and Gwyneth Paltrow sell the same products to two different crowds. So you can see where I'm making the point. Radical feeds off of radical. It's just how it's always been, and it's a cycle. This leads me to the overarching point of this video, which is how creators like Elliott Hulse actually create and help sustain movements like fat acceptance. Because a radicalized group like fat acceptance often isn't born from nothing, right? They're born from talking points like Elliott's. And we have seen our fat acceptance friends in my videos, in my research, saying things like, when you're prescribed weight loss, you're being prescribed an eating disorder. Or that every diet and calorie reduction is equal to starvation.
Because the second I start ignoring my body's cues, it's over. The instant my body tells me it is hungry and I choose either not to feed it or to underfeed it, which is what a calorie deficit is, it knows it's time for famine. It goes into scarcity mode. It thinks I don't have access to food, and as a result, my body turns on all the alarms to try to get me to eat as much as humanly possible so that I can survive this famine.
These talking points are born from content like Elliott's. Content like this.
Crazy technique to lose 20 pounds in 90 days. Stop eating. That's right, fasting has been shown to be better than calorie reduction for fat loss. On a calorie-restricted diet, you're still spiking insulin, which is one of the key hormones that are used to keep you fat. To stop eating completely or fast, you also decrease insulin and increase growth hormone. The best way to get started is with intermittent fasting. Basically, taking time windows throughout the day where you don't eat. My favorite is 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating. If you really want to skyrocket those fat loss results, try prolonged fasting. Either go 24, 36, or 72 hours without eating, and then have a massive refeed and try again. I followed a strategy of fasting for 72 hours every Monday in 2018 and dropped over 50 pounds of fat. But don't take my word for it, there's tons of research done on fasting these days, and you could look up the work of Dr. Jason Fung.
So let's break what we just saw down just a little bit, because if you're like me, your head is spinning. He says fasting has been shown to be better for fat loss than calorie reduction. But fasting is calorie reduction. Like, those things are equal. So what is the purpose of this sentence? It's literally just a word salad that's been spewed confidently at a screen. Like, if we're being completely transparent, it makes absolutely no sense. But because someone confident, attractive, good looking, thinks of himself as an alpha male has said it, people are going to follow it, repeat it, believe it. So what does that even mean? Fasting is a calorie reduction, so how can it be better than a calorie reduction? Next, he says, if you go into a calorie reduction, you spike your insulin. But by fasting, you lower your insulin. Again, what? If a calorie reduction spikes your insulin and fasting is a calorie reduction, how does that lower your insulin? Again, just think about it. Just think about it. He also says here that you'll see an increase in growth hormone. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about growth hormone, but I do know someone who does, and that is Coach Greg. So I'm going to drop him here.
And what good is that? You have more growth hormone, but you're not eating any protein, amino acids, and so you can't actually build muscle. You think growth hormone is magical? It can magically build muscle without any of the building blocks needed. It cannot. It would be kind of like saying, wow, let's hire a bunch of carpenters to work on this house. Got a crew of 20 ready to build my house faster than last time. Only problem is there's no wood, nails, nothing. How can you build a house without the building blocks? And so regardless of the fact you may have more growth hormone, it's of little consequence if you're not eating.
And then he goes off the literal deep end, telling people to do prolonged fasting for 24, 36, or 72 hours before doing a massive refeed. What even is this advice? How is it okay for people online to give this advice to other people? This is the advice that's ringing in the ears of fat acceptance every single time they spew their nonsense. And it's this binary thinking that makes people feel like they have to be trapped between one of the two extremes. You either have to be in Elliott's camp and do things the way Elliott does them because look at him, he's good looking and has all these things going for him, or you have to be in fat acceptance because you have been doing the things that Elliott says, you've starved yourself for 36 hours, then you had not only a giant refeed, but a binge, and then that binge cycle continues, you start to get irritable, you're now depressed and feeling shame. You start Googling, what can I do to fix this? And lo and behold, you find fat acceptance and intuitive eating telling you to eat whatever you want and you'll still lose weight. And it leaves people feeling like there's not an in between. People become trapped. I mean, sometimes for years, in my case, years, between these two lines of thinking. You think you need to do the things Elliott's spewing, you switch and you start doing fat acceptance or try to do intuitive eating, which is why I own the intuitive eating book. And then you go back and you try to do things the way Elliott does and you don't realize that it's okay to be in between. To be in between the two, to break out of this binary black and white type of thinking that the internet tends to hold on to. But not us, right? I've got you all in my corner. We are the in-betweeners. We have found ourselves after years, months, days of cycling, figuring out that it's okay to fall somewhere in the middle of the road. You don't have to be so extreme all the time. You don't have to fast for extended periods of time, and you don't have to avoid calorie counting. You can strike a balance. You can do it. But it's hard as hell because these two binary schools of thought still exist and they're still constantly putting pressure on you, which is why I always say that fat acceptance is no better than the diet industry they claim to hate because they're equals. They're equally radical. sitting on the sidelines on your shoulders telling you have to do it this way or you have to do it this way. So I've done a video like this before. You have to put your blinders on. Just keep moving and keep trucking, but it is hard as hell to do that. So to bring it around, to bring it back to Mr. Elliott himself, I think it's valuable to talk about this and to make sure that it's clear that while fat acceptance is problematic, there's this other side of things that created this group that's over here. And I think it behooves all of us, especially us in-betweeners, to sort of come up together, come up strong, and let people know that you don't have to be in one of these camps. Like, you don't have to be stuck in this crazy cycle for years and years and years. And I think we have to acknowledge together that it's hard as hell to not fall back into one of these groups, because it is. I have to fight it actively all the time. I found myself staying away from fat acceptance, but every once in a while I'm like, do I need to try these things that they're talking about over here? And the truth is no. No, I do not. And honestly, in putting content like this out there, I'm hoping that if there are people stuck in the cycle, maybe they will find a channel like mine, like Fundy Times, like Nadia and Imp, someone who is in between telling them you don't have to do either or. Because there were very limited channels out there to tell me that when I needed to hear it the most. So I guess I'm just trying to elevate voices like that, elevate this message, and just make it clear that we're not putting up with anyone's shit. Whether it's Elliott Hulse or our jock scientist herself. We're not having it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye!